Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Welcome to Centered. I'm Angie Yingst, your weird friend reading the history of a company on the back of your eggnog container and then repeating interesting factoids back to you. I really began writing this introduction about 40 minutes ago and then fell down a rabbit hole of researching history. And in my first draft, I talked about the land I lived on, gave opinionated diatribes and passionate rants, suggestions on what to do with yourself. And honestly, this episode isn't about any of that. And so most of you will listen to it whenever you feel like it. And I was making it very, very specific. So all of that is to say that my name is Angie and I have ADHD with a focus on every single letter in that acronym. And this is not surprising to most people who've interacted with me as I talk a mile a minute, jump from topic to topic, leave all the doors open, and bang into walls. When I was a little girl, I just did cartwheel after cartwheel after cartwheel after cartwheel while my mother cooked. And I talked a mile a minute about opinions on Tom and Jerry, like why is a cat so smart at contraptions and so dumb at emotional intelligence? And oh, I just figured that one out. So um, if my kids were listening, they would probably say, "Are you serious right now, bro?" So I asked Kyra Pauls, my frequent guest and fellow neurodivergent, to join me to talk about neurodivergence. But this is not one of those where I'm going to give you a bunch of facts about neurodivergence. It's actually the opposite of our instinct. So we're talking about our own personal experience with being neurodivergent and what life looks like for us, how we find it a strength in our professions and when we deal with other people. Kyra has ADHD. She is autistic. I have ADHD. I was diagnosed this year, though I suspected it for something like ever. Um, and it was really the missing piece of the puzzle. I felt more understood and seen since my diagnosis than I have ever felt in my life. And I actually experienced a kind of like euphoria from someone understanding me and understanding my brain. It was pretty awesome. Actually, it's not awesome. It also is hard, very hard. And I've lived with that hardness for a long, long time. But it seems like when you become aware of it, you really, really become aware of it. And then it becomes extra hard. So that's been what the last 6 months have been like for me. But I didn't edit this episode too much. It's pretty much as is. Kira and I are both um, off topic often. We explore tangents. We like to laugh, the usual stuff. So if you don't know Kira, Kira Pauls is a social worker and therapist who has training in archetypal analysis from a Jungian perspective. She is certified as a shadow retrieval facilitator and trained as a yoga teacher and massage therapist. She's a practicing witch and druid, and you can find Kira online at awintarot.com. As always, I hope you enjoy this episode. We love hearing feedback about our conversations, what you want to hear more of and what you want to hear less of. I'm also prepping another Q&A episode, so if you have a question for me, I have a record button on my Anchor page. I have one on my website, so feel free to record a question with me. You can record on your phone, your computer, and email it to me at angie@themoonandstone.com. Or you can just write in. Enjoy the episode. How did your journey begin? Like, did you get diagnosed with
Well,
ADHD or?
so it's kind of complicated because at the time, like when I was a kid, there was a big influx of ADHD diagnoses for
Yeah.
boys. And so at that time, though, a lot of it was, kid is hyperactive in class, teacher doesn't like it, teacher tells parent, get kid evaluated, parent is then told to put kid on Ritalin, Adderall, something of the sort,
Yeah.
right? and it was almost kind of becoming like it was controversial at the time,
Yeah.
um, for a lot of reasons that it's still even controversial to this day.
Right.
Um, and so with my mother, she was a social worker. My brother had been It had been suggested that my brother was ADHD. He very much was the hyperactive, didn't really sit still, was always wiggling around in his seat. My mom refused to get him tested because she knew that pretty much all they wanted to do was then put him on a medication, and she didn't agree with it. Um, so it's kind of inconclusive with my brother. It's like pretty certain that he was. Similar things ended up happening with me too. Mine was a little different though. I was not hyperactive. Mine was a lot of different like reading comprehension
Yeah.
issues. Like I would just read and not really remember. But I was definitely like hyperverbal in some ways, but then from a very, very young age, I was selectively mute. And the selective mutism even was always kind of approached as shyness, but there were a lot of people, even in my neighborhood, that believed that I didn't speak at all. Um, so I remember being evaluated when I was young as well, and I think it was very similar in that, at that time, I think my mother's frame of mind was what is really the point of getting this diagnosis? Like, what is it really going to mean for my kid to be diagnosed with something like this? And like honestly, I think even to this day, it's a good question because when we're talking about neurodivergence, particularly like autism and things like that, I mean, there are real legitimate troubles you can get into around diagnoses like that in the sense of um, I was just talking to someone recently about immigration as one really good example. It's like, well, if you're diagnosed autistic, you're not immigrating to Australia, New
Yeah.
Zealand, because they don't allow that.
What does that
And
mean?
not
They don't allow what?
they won't allow autistics to immigrate into the country because
Oh,
autistic
wow.
individuals are disabled, so they are leeches on the system.
Holy
And so they're
crap.
not going to bring anything productive to the country. Because, versus if I were to say, try to immigrate to any of those countries, and I said, I didn't say I'm autistic, but I said, hey, you know what? I have a master's degree in social work. They'd be like, come on in, come on in, come on in.
Yeah.
But diagnoses are very complicated in that way. I mean, even mental health diagnoses such as
I was gonna say.
bipolar and borderline personality disorders, talking life insurance issues and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the idea behind diagnosis is complicated with these things because it's like, okay, does this mean that you then get discriminated against because of it? Or is it something that actually helps you? And I think in the 90s when I was going to school, it was the former rather than the latter.
Absolutely. I mean, that's how it was for my mom too. I mean, my mom tried to get us evaluated because we were very hyper, and I don't think she I don't know what she thought. She just would say stuff like this kid never sleeps. That was like
Right.
a big one. And the doctor's like, well, they do good in school, so it's fine. Like it was just like you don't want
Mhm.
a diagnosis of something on their
Right,
chart. But I mean,
right.
I was born 1974, so this is the
Yeah,
80s. So I
right.
don't even think they treated with I don't even know when they started treating with
I have
Adderall and
no
Ritalin.
idea. No, and it's like, and that is the really tough thing to determine and discern even now. It's like, some of these diagnoses, if it's a matter of if the person gets this diagnosis and then they're able to receive the accommodations that they need, then great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. But
But
it's like
yeah.
in the past, it was so I don't think people were handling it in any real way whatsoever. It's only been, I don't know what the last couple years that people have been talking about it more
Yeah.
seriously.
I mean, I guess I didn't even think about it as a possibility for me because I just didn't, it wasn't discussed
Right.
and I never thought about it. I'm just like, oh, I'm just built differently or my brain works differently. And, one of the interesting things about getting an official diagnosis is that it just confirmed a lot of stuff I already knew, but it also validated the fact that I have all these tools that they would have already recommended because I
Right.
like figured out how to work with my brain. It's still incredibly hard, like
Yeah.
my timer and, a friend of mine said, oh, I use the Pomodoro method. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And she said, oh, I set a timer for every 20 minutes, I take a break. And I was like, oh, I do that. I didn't know that was called something. I just, because
Yeah,
I
there's a
can't,
name for it.
there's a
Yeah.
name for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. No, that is. That is. And I mean, honestly, I think like that's the sad thing about, neurodivergence and how it's handled in our society is that really there's nothing strange or weird or wrong about it at all. I remember watching this documentary that I don't actually necessarily recommend. Like I do and I don't. It's called Horse Boy. And it's these parents who, if you ask me, they are incredibly pig-headed and narcissistic. And they have an autistic son. And, the whole time in the beginning, it's all, woe is me, woe is me. It sucks so much for me that my kid is like this. My life sucks because my kid is
Ugh.
like this. And it's like the whole like autism speaks thing, and autism moms in some cases, like my life sucks because my kid is different. Um,
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. Only because, like, maybe it's because I have ADHD and I'm neurodivergent that
right.
I totally understand and love. Like, I didn't realize that most of my friends either have ADHD or are autistic. Like, I did not realize that. But once they started like coming to that realization too, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just surround myself with people who are neurodivergent because we get each other.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's that's the thing. It's kind of the approach to it. Now, I won't say, this kid did definitely have some behaviors that would be very stressful to try to care for him in some context. But for the most part, yeah, it felt very like, wow, that's very degrading of your child, but okay.
Yeah. But the
And anyway,
self-knowledge does help me. Like the self-knowledge helps me and it helps like with the other neurodivergent people in my life. Like if somebody has identified as autistic to me, then I know, okay, I can't expect things that I would expect out of other people, which is like, I'm going to make sure that my house is not having a TV on, a radio on, people screaming. Like there's a sensitivity that I'm hyper aware of when I know somebody is
sure.
autistic coming to my house. That
Yeah.
being said, I have, we all keep the house very quiet and comfy. And I was
Yeah.
buying fuzzy socks yesterday
Uh-huh.
or on Tuesday, and I was putting them in, and the woman checking me out said, "Oh, these are a good buy." And I said, "Yeah, I have children that need comfort, like comforting, soft things that they can put on their body when they get home because they're stressed during school." And she said, "Oh, my daughter has terrible anxiety." And we had this whole conversation about how both of our kids have anxiety and then later
Mhm.
identified themselves as kind of being on the spectrum from like self-diagnosis from like TikTok or whatever. But like understanding that means that when my kid gets home, I know what to do for her. I don't
Mhm.
expect her to be like on because she's
Right.
totally melting down from the day.
Well,
So,
yeah, and that is one of the issues with, I think, initially with the approach that these parents are trying, and that a lot of the standard protocols like ABA
yeah.
attempt to do is it's more about getting the kid to um, fit into a box rather than making a box that will fit the kid. And with this horse boy documentary, it's like so interesting because what they end up doing is they end up taking, like, this kid has a fascination with horses, and whenever he's around horses, he completely calms down. And so they find out about the horse people, shamanic peoples in Asia, and they take him to Mongolia and then later also to Siberia, where he meets the shamanic peoples. But it starts off really interesting in that they're traveling with this Mongolian family, and they have a little boy who is the same age as this autistic child. And go freaking figure, that kid and this kid get along just fine.
Wow.
They're playing just fine. And it's like, yeah, because this kid hasn't been taught, the Mongolian child hasn't been taught the Western standards and ideals of, hey, this is when a kid is acting weird and maybe you should stare at him and not play with him if he's doing that. Right?
That
Like,
is
it's
so
like
interesting.
the cultural interpretation is so different. Here, our cultural interpretation is, what the hell's wrong with that kid?
Yep.
There, the cultural interpretation is, it's a kid.
Yep.
It's a kid. All kids are different. They behave different. They need different things. It's a kid.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting just to start. But then from there, they end up taking the kid to the shamans. And I remember, I think it was some shamans they met up with in Siberia. Their treatment for the child was actually whipping the parents, because they said that the parents needed to feel their pain. They needed to feel their own pain.
Holy cow.
Right? Exactly. And that was what was poisoning this child, was that the parents weren't holding on to their own pain.
Oh my gosh. So
And
like basically they were being too empathic with the child, or they were.
no, I think what it is that they are unconsciously dumping their shit on the kid.
Oh
It's
my
like, if my
gosh.
kid is weird, that makes me feel insecure. It's like, yeah, well, guess what? That's not your kid's problem. That's your problem.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so,
Oh my God.
yeah. And then the last shaman they met with, the kid really had a connection to that shaman, and that shaman told them that the child was a shaman,
Yeah.
which many have, even theorized about with shamanic peoples and, autistic repetitive behaviors and stuff like that, drumming, rattling.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it's just really interesting to consider, like, that it is a real thing on one hand. I mean, the final shaman even identified it as something in particular, but on the other hand, a lot of it is so much within this cultural context. It's like, if our culture is so rigid that it doesn't fit certain types of people into its box, then we have to be like, well, it's because this person's neurodivergent and this person's Black and this person's gay and this person's trans, and that's why.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, even like going through those things that you just listed, like that, being gay was not a identifier before the 20th century. People
No,
didn't
even
say I'm a gay man. They were just like, I'm attracted to
right.
whatever. Like they didn't say it.
And even all of like 10 years ago, it was still within the dominant culture to say that they were choosing that lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
About.
Right. Right.
I mean, I think
And
that was for healing within
mhm,
the gay community to say like I was, this is a genetic thing. I was born this way.
right.
But then on the other hand, it makes it not, I don't know how to say this in a way. It's like the flow of who you are changes. The
Right.
flow
Yeah.
of what we do changes. And, you know, I know when I was younger, I definitely didn't feel like I was always meant to be monogamous because I was so attracted. My sexuality
Mm.
was so up and on fire, right?
Mhm.
But as I've gotten older, obviously it's like, yeah, no, I'm very comfortable with monogamy. You know what I mean? But
Right. Well,
does that
I
mean
think
that I have to label myself polyamorous as a young person and now monogamous. No, like I'm just me, you
That's
know.
so interesting that you say that too, because, I feel like, I talk to a lot of clients about that a lot, just this idea of like identities like shifting and changing. And, that's like one of the whole things, like, I have a client whose parents always bring up like, well, all these people who, um, try to reverse their gender
Yeah.
changes. You know what I mean? What do they call that again? But anyway,
Detransitioning.
detransitioning. Yes, they detransition or whatever. And they talk about this as if, you know, first of all, they talk about that like that's an extremely common thing, which it is not.
It's so small of a percentage.
But even in the times that it does, they talk about it like it's the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I'm like, so you mean someone's gender identity is fluid and changes? Like, I mean, I think that's not
That's
a
the point.
fail. Just like what you were saying about polyamory and monogamy, it's like it actually would make some amount of sense that that association would change throughout someone's life. And it doesn't mean that someone failed in going one direction or the other. It just means that that's life. Our
Yeah.
identities are not set in stone. They're fluid.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was like 15, my mom asked me like if I was gay.
Hmm.
And I just remember saying like, I don't know. Because I really
Yeah.
didn't know. Like I
No.
dated only boys, but I didn't know anybody who was a lesbian. I hadn't
Right.
met a lesbian in my life. And then, as I kind of moved to the city and started meeting people, I realized, oh, maybe I'm bisexual,
Yeah.
because I'm attracted to women and I'm attracted to men. But, as time has gone on and the identities have increased since I was 16 years old, I don't know. I don't know where I would fall in. So I like just call myself queer because I'm like, I
Right.
know I'm not like strictly straight, but I can't tell you because I am monogamous.
Yeah.
So it's like that identity. I like the identity of just queer. It's like an umbrella that's just like, I don't know. It depends on who I'm
Yeah.
with and what relationship model we develop with that,
Absolutely.
and I've been in a stable relationship for 17 years. So it's a little different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the
No,
same
and
with, like, for me, neurodivergence is similar. It's
yeah.
just like, I know that my brain doesn't work the same way other people's brain does, but in
Mhm.
my line of work, actually, it works really, really well.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Like with what I do and how I approach things. And it
Yeah.
has served me.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I really tell my clients who are neurodivergent too is like, you figure out whatever tools and methods work for you. But an awful lot of how do I manage my ADHD? How do I manage my autism? Aside from, what kinds of things does an ADHD person like, or what are they inclined
Yeah.
towards, or an autistic person, but how do I manage it? Very often is how do I make my neurodivergent brain at least appear neurotypical?
Yeah.
And that's just not only is it not realistic ultimately, it's also not healthy. And a lot of it is like identifying like what are my actual strengths because I have this, because my brain is different, and how do I emphasize that? Which, yeah, like what you're saying, it's like you kind of did that without even realizing that that's what you're doing. I did it too. I didn't realize that that's why I was doing it, but it was like, I've got to work for myself. I need to do something that's going to be creative, that can, be connected to something passionate for me. I can't just do a job.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And paperwork is always going to be an issue for me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have this big file basket that's just filled with crap, like all my tax stuff. And
Yeah.
it just like on my to-do list every week, I carry it over, go through
Yeah.
the filing basket.
Yeah.
Never happens. I haven't done like my Q2 tax breakdown
Yeah.
yet. So I'm like, it's not fun for me. Like, that's the thing about my brain, is that like mostly my job is all my special interests. Like
Yeah.
tarot and crystals and animal medicine and journeying, like all the stuff like I got really excited about and had as a hobby have
Yeah.
like slowly become part of my career, because I can't imagine going back to doing something that, but you know, all that being said, I used to work, like I got a job as a temp at an engineering firm when I graduated from college, and it was like road and highway and transportation engineering, which I know sounds really boring. And like, even to road and highway engineers, it can sound boring when you're reading that stuff. But I started getting really interested and excited about, like, it became a special interest. I kind of like understood why these guys got excited about designing a certain bridge in a certain way and creative solutions to like land use planning and stuff like that. Like I actually considered going to graduate school for land use planning because I loved it so much.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, I can see that though, because honestly, I think that the neurodivergent brain in the group, it's not that they are supposed to only like certain topics or subjects. It's that whatever subject they are in, like they are going to be the one like really taking a lot of initiative, the one with the new creative ideas for how to do things. To really like I think that they're in every single field in order to move the fields in new directions.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
well, and I think about it too, it's like I know it's so funny, it's actually like I know it's my neurodivergence, but like I actually really enjoy like doing accounting stuff like for my
Yeah,
taxes. Like I really like that.
I do too, but I have to have a full 100% day because I get so into it. I don't even eat.
Right, you hyper focus, me
Yeah.
too. Yeah, I will just be right there with
Yeah. Like last
that.
time I was doing
Yeah.
taxes, I actually peed my pants because I forgot to go up to the bathroom. And I've had 4 children, so it's not
Right.
that hard for that to happen. But like, I will like forget to take care of my body, period.
Yeah, no. I get
Oh
that.
my
I
God.
get that. It's so
I
funny
can't believe
because
I
I
just
it makes
admitted
me
that.
it makes me think of my brother, and it's like the most ADHD thing ever, but I just have memories of him as a kid sitting in a chair and he's just like wiggling around like crazy because number one, he's wiggly, but then number two, he also has to pee so bad.
Yeah.
But he's in the middle of playing like Zelda on Super Nintendo. And he's like, no, I can't. He's just like wiggling, wiggling, wiggling.
Oh my gosh, you just described my youngest. And then he like
Honestly, yeah, he reminds
throws it and he
me. Yeah.
runs
Yeah,
like to the bathroom hoping to make it.
exactly.
Oh my gosh.
That's so
I mean,
funny.
that's the thing, is seeing this stuff in my kids and then like having that healing part of just being like, oh, I remember doing that.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
remember just like every time we went to dinner, my parents were like, you have to be good. You have to be good. You have to be good. And like, I never knew the formula for being good, but I
Right.
realize now that the formula for being good was sitting still,
Yeah.
because I could not freaking do that. Like I
Right.
would stand on, like I just couldn't sit. So like wanted to go like, can I go out to the lobby and play like Pac-Man, or can I go do this, or can I go do, like I could never just sit at a table and
Yeah.
have dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm similar with that. I even recently it's wild. I think it's because I have been trying to honor my neurodivergence and like work with it, and I'm fortunate that I have a job where like I can do that. I can
Yeah.
kind of work with it a little bit more. And I've been noticing that now I've actually started to be able to like slow down. And for the first time, I was able to like sit and like watch a TV show and like actually watch it
Yeah.
and not be like running around like, no, I need to go get this. I'm gonna go make this. I'm gonna go pick up this. I'm gonna look at my phone. I'm gonna,
I
you
know.
know, Marco Polo Angie back. I'm gonna like
What I do is like I do a crossword puzzle, play solitaire, I like do so many different things while I'm watching TV. It
Mm-hmm.
drives my husband nuts because he's like, why
Yeah.
can't you just put the phone down? I'm like, I'm not doing anything on the phone. Like I'm just occupied. Like I have read about neurodivergent, like ADHD brains need like 100% activated, right?
Yeah.
So like if
Right.
something's really boring, they also have to like listen to music or do something else. So like I cannot fold the freaking laundry if the TV's not on.
I know, right? Like just in silence.
I cannot
What
do it.
even is that? That's disgusting.
I know. I can sometimes do it when I listen to a podcast, but like the visual part is hard. I
Yeah.
need to like have
Oh,
a TV
yeah.
on. And Sam
Yeah.
gets so mad because it's like 9 o'clock at night and I have to fold laundry and I just turn on literally anything. It's like The Voice. I haven't watched any of this season, but I'm just like watching something to keep something on. And so, but like that works for
So
me. That
funny.
that works. But I've heard
Yeah.
like, and I notice this with myself, if I'm writing and I need to be thinking about words and it's working a part of my brain, I have to have it totally silent or like some kind of music that is just pure background. But if I'm doing something like I don't need that much of my brain power, then I want like loud, screamy music that I sing along to, you know.
Right.
So
Right. No,
like
definitely.
100%, but it has to be a different percentages,
Yeah.
whatever's working. So can you talk a little bit about masking?
Mm, yeah.
Like, does that just purely apply to autistic people, or do you think it applies to all neurodivergent people?
No, I mean, honestly, I think that the concept of masking is literally something that everybody does.
I do too. Yeah.
I mean, because you even think about chronic pain
Yeah.
or physical disability, right? Like people mask all the time with that,
Yeah.
which masking would just basically be like putting on that persona, putting on that performance, which I mean, it's very, I mean, it's very Jungian psychology in that sense that it's like
Yeah.
you have this persona, but then in reality, there's there's the part that you don't reveal to everyone, but you're aware of, and then there's also the parts that you don't reveal to everyone that you also are not aware of. But I think that masking, even though like it's just like the spoon concept. Like people talked about spoons with autism. You only have so many spoons in a day, so you need to figure out how much each activity costs in spoons and then make sure that you are getting the spoons that you need. Otherwise, you won't have enough to do something like brush your teeth or whatever.
Yeah.
But like that also applies to everyone. And so that's the thing about masking is that like whether it's autism or ADHD, and I'm needing to, you know, as your mom put it, be good.
Yeah.
Like be good means put on the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you noticed, like, identified those in yourself, and like how have you worked through that? Because I think a lot of people don't understand how to work with that
Mm-hmm.
masking idea, whether they're neurodivergent or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Um
Like I noticed my daughter, for example, when she started like kind of reading more about neurodivergence and understanding herself as maybe being on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, after she got diagnosed with ADHD, she kind of was like, but I think there's more, because they do like a full screening. They do a screening for autism, and her therapist was like, I think you also might have some of these characteristics too.
mhm.
And so B was asking me, like, what do I do with this? And I'm like, it's just something to understand how your brain works and what you might need on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis. And she started understanding that she was masking a lot of like repetitive movements like this. So
Mhm.
I, kept saying to her, you don't have to mask at home. Like you
Mhm.
don't have to not do those things. So I notice her doing more of like the rocking thing just to self-soothe and all those kind of things while she's at home, but she doesn't do it out. And
Yeah.
I don't think I need to change her from doing that. You know, she's trying to fit in at school, you know,
Right,
but home is a
exactly.
safe place, hopefully, where she can just do that without being reprimanded and
Yeah.
that.
Well, it's interesting you say that because it's like I think back to high school and even some of college and what made it really challenging for me because high school was very challenging for me. School in general, after early elementary school. Of course, no, even early elementary school, I remember just first day of kindergarten, or first grade, I had big issues. Um, so I school was always an issue. And a lot of it was, it's a sensory nightmare.
Yes.
The lighting, the noises, being around all those people. Um, but the big thing was, not being in my own environment. And what does that mean? Well, when you're not in your own environment, you have to mask.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's exhausting to be there and have to behave in a certain way and not just do the things that your body naturally would want you to do. It's like, you have to have a hall pass to go to the bathroom, and you have to, like everything has to be approved. Every single thing that you do. If you even stand up in your seat, like you're going to be asked why you're doing that and to sit back down. And like,
Yeah.
just everything is so controlled. And I was thinking about that a lot because when I was at my in-person seminar for the Jungian seminar, I remember one of the instructors had said, I like for everyone to be very body focused. So just please get up and move around or shake yourself out whenever you need to, like go to the bathroom, like stretch out across chairs, like do whatever it is that you need to do at any given point in time. And even the instructor would frequently like get up and like move around or do certain things that would be seen in a classroom setting as like not necessarily like up to a code or standard
Yeah.
or whatever, right? And it was just so helpful because it was like, okay, now I can feel it like melting the mask, where it's like I can
Yeah.
just relax and chill here. It can be like at home. And when I'm at home, like my legs are curled up underneath me, and then 5 minutes later they're stretched out, and then 5 minutes
Yeah.
later they're you know what I mean? So I think that there's a lot of that it's like it's we don't realize even all the tiny, tiny, tiny little micro things that are being masked at any given time, let alone the bigger things. Like I need to like actually like move my hands.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do that in circle too, which is like you can keep your phone
Yeah.
out, go take care of your body. If you're hungry, eat. If you're thirsty, drink. If you have to poop, poop. You know, like whatever happens,
Yeah.
happens. But part of that is because I had trouble when I first went to circle that everybody got dressed up and we're like everybody seemed to be able to sit still. And
Yeah.
I was like the only one that couldn't. And I didn't understand that. And I always felt very self-conscious about the fact that it was like so wiggly,
Yeah.
like always uncomfortable,
Yeah.
you know. So
No, definitely. Yeah, it is interesting because there is something that feels so unsafe about having all of your bodily autonomy taken from you. Go
yeah,
figure.
yeah.
Which
It
is like you
does.
you know, it's funny we talk about that, now of course with Roe v. Wade and everything, like the government or whoever having control of your body, and it's like we do it to children all the time. I don't
Yeah, we do.
We do. We tell them that they can't even go to the bathroom until Johnny has come back with the hall pass. Yeah,
It's really messed up.
it's really fucked up.
I mean, but the funny part about that is when during COVID and the kids were learning from home,
Hmm.
my kids did not thrive in that environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Zero structure or
zero
anything. Yeah.
structure. It was kind of,
Exactly.
yeah, it was a little Lord of the Flies in our house.
No, I can see that too.
And yet, I mean, it's not that they just didn't like they had to now stay on a computer and sit there.
Yeah. No,
They
absolutely.
didn't get to switch rooms during class for classes. There was just nothing but this one monotonous way to be.
No, and I find that tough even as an adult. I can only
Oh, yeah.
imagine as a kid. And then like if you have any neurodivergence, any ADHD, any like I need to be moving, doing
Yeah.
something else. Like, oh gosh.
I know
Yeah.
they got to be masters of doing stuff under the camera.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely.
Whatever.
Definitely. But yeah, and like with masking too, I was like thinking, some other big ones, like a big one for me has always been smiling.
Yeah.
Um in the sense of, I remember my mother told me that when I was little that I was going to have to be careful because if I didn't smile and I was quiet, that people were going to think I was a snob. And so
What?
that, yes. And so that is one of those masking things that, again, I think that it can apply to anyone, everyone. You think about
Yeah.
little girls in particular and the messages that they're taught about like being like nice and polite and pretty and all these different things. Like there's a mask forming right then. But for neurodivergence, it definitely was because I always had a lot of insecurity too about when I was very little, like I would have a lot of trouble with eye contact, and still
Yeah.
do. And people would make comments about it. And even as a small child, I remember being talked about as if I was shady or I was deceptive or something because I wouldn't make eye contact. And so it's like having this very, very, very approachable, friendly mask of like, look, I can make eye contact and I can smile and do all these things, like became like one of my primaries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one. I
And
have
and
a
that
really hard time like not showing my emotions on my face. Like I'm like a big eye roller, like disgust
yeah.
person, especially as a kid. Like if somebody was staring at me, I would like look at them and like do that like kind of thing. Like I hated that.
Nice.
I hated like eye contact and stuff. So I just had this like tough exterior. So I have a twin who's very, very friendly. And I was like not good at masking that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So
No,
like
that's
people
so funny.
discovering as I'm an adult that I'm a nice person is kind of funny to me too. Because people would always tell my sister what a bitch I was. And I'm like, really? I'm so nice.
So funny.
No, I was
So
not nice.
funny.
And the
Yeah.
part of that was like, you're not nice because you can't just smile and sit there. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like
Right.
you listen to things
Right.
and respond.
No, exactly. It's once again going back to that whole thing of like, do you fit into the box or not? And um, yeah, with neurodivergence, you're usually on one extreme or the other of,
Yeah.
on the ends of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think too, I mean, that's the thing about masking is that that's what leads people to believe that like you're neurotypical to where if you tell them that you're not, especially autistic, they're like, no, you're not. No, you're
Yeah.
not. Or even sometimes people thinking, well, I'm exactly like you, so then I must be too. And it's like, hold up.
Yeah.
You don't know me.
Yeah.
Like, um, there's it can be very, very, very convincing for those who have learned to do it from a very young age. I mean, both of us are talking about our masking. We're talking like really little.
Oh yeah.
So if we've been doing it that long, it can be very convincing. And when I was a kid, I had always said that I like my dream when I grew up was I wanted to be an actress. Probably because I already fucking was.
It is like very seductive to like think about being able to be somebody else though, you know, especially when we're not comfortable being ourselves in public, or, you know, we have to play all these different roles. It's like,
Yeah.
I'd like to play one that somebody else makes up, because clearly the one I'm making up isn't working all the time.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, God. I used to like not think I could act.
Oh, really?
Right. Because I'm like, I just can't hide it. Like, if I don't like somebody, they know it. You know, I'm just really bad at that.
Yeah. Again, it's like we had like, that's the neurodivergence thing. You're on one extreme or the
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
interesting to think about this stuff, but like on a day-to-day basis, it's just me like with all the cabinets open, trying to finish one task at a time
Yeah.
and then failing big time, and just
Yeah.
like
No, that
my thing.
I know. It's like million tabs, just want to do one thing.
Yeah. I just
Yeah.
want to finish. I want to start and finish one thing. But
Yeah, no.
what do you think is the gift of it, like in terms of spiritual work? Like with the tarot, I feel like it's such a gift because the tarot is a shapeshifter. You know, like one
Yes.
day a card means one thing, the next day it means something completely different. And I sometimes think like my attention to detail, my hyper focus, like helps me see different things in the cards every day.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when we were talking about the special interest thing, I mean, I think that's part of it too. Like, um, and I'm sure that you found this as a teacher too. It's kind of tough when, you have students and they want to know the cards as well as you do. And number
yeah,
one, there's a big gap in years of practicing, number one. But number two, there's also the fact that it's like you don't know how I've obsessed over this
right.
for years. It's like I didn't actually at first learn from anybody at all. I was just so damn obsessed with it
Exactly.
that I learned it. And so if you're not, I can't just give that to you. And I've had people say that it's like with certain topics, I'll have like an encyclopedic like kind of knowledge about certain things. And it's like, yeah, because it's like I just obsess over it
Yeah.
and then just download it all.
Yeah, me too. People
Yeah.
always like, how do you do that? I'm like, I it's not a like it's not a trick. Like I
Right.
just read, and I wake up at 3 in the morning and start reading and don't stop until the night. You know, like
Right.
I don't know what to tell you. I've always been like that. I just devour topics until I've like
Right.
burnt out from them. And then they go on the shelf and the next topic comes in that I'm obsessed about. So I have 50
Exactly.
books on tarot. I don't,
Exactly. No, that's exactly what it is. It's like I'm just obsessed with it.
yeah.
And yeah, it is such a complex system. It's like, why I think that neurodivergents very often are incredible musicians too,
Yeah.
right? Is because it's a very, very complex system and there's a lot of patterns and you need to remember the patterns.
Exactly.
You play the guitar, there's the patterns on the fretboard that you play. If you play the piano, there's the patterns that you play in the keys. And it's like, if you have the pattern recognition plus you are someone who is absolutely obsessed with it enough that you'll just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. Like that's my partner. He's an incredible guitarist, and that's what his thing was, is that, when he was a kid, that's just what he did. He just played and played and played and played and
Yeah.
played and played and played. Um, it's not some kind of like magic trick. It's, I remember my ex-husband would always get really upset when, he's an incredible artist and people would say like, "Oh, you're so talented." And he's like, "This isn't a fucking talent." He's like, "I worked at it so hard."
And
Um,
the amount of detail that he goes into in his artwork, like sometimes I look at his artwork, like seriously, I've looked at his artwork and I just wouldn't be able to like have my hyper attention on that for that long. You know what I
I
mean? Like,
know, I
it's just like
know.
I couldn't do it. It's like when you look at Kim Kranz's work in the Wild Unknown Tarot, like all her little
Yeah,
hashtag, you know, she like not hashtags, but she like makes hash marks on, it's
yeah.
like the kind of hyper focus is like only our neurodivergent brain could do that.
Right. And that's the thing, you know, he's definitely autistic and my current partner is as well, and that's what has led them to being able to do these
Yeah.
things. And so yeah, it's you know, again, it's not some kind of gift that we were just handed. It's not some kind of you know, just talent or something like that, but rather it's something that or a trick. It's like we literally are just that into it and obsessed with it.
Yeah. I mean, if I read a name of a stone that I don't know, I like Google it, look it up, find out the most
Right?
hardness, find out where it's mined, find out who mines it. Like I go down the rabbit hole. So people
Yeah.
will say to me like, "Oh, have you ever heard of this crystal?" And I haven't. I like literally will read it in a book so that I can do the deep dive later to find out what minerals make up its content and blah 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 blah
Right.
blah, because I'm a, you know, obsessed. And so people do say stuff to me all the time like, "Oh my gosh, your brain." But it's one of those things that I just think it's wired to go down rabbit holes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you know, I'm just like I need to like do the research, and
It
so
is. I remember there was this one person I was involved with, and he was someone where, you know, he grew up a very traditional kind of background, had to follow very traditional kind of norms and stuff like that. And he would go down conspiracy theory rabbit holes. And to me, it seemed like a profound misuse of
oh yeah.
something that is definitely a neurodivergent gift. He just had never been given the opportunity to explore it in a neurodivergent way because he was so stuck in this like Republican mode of like
Yeah.
life and everything that it's like he didn't even have art or anything like that to go to. So I just think about that. Like there's other people out there who, you know, some of that you see might even be linked to neurodivergence, the obsessive obsessions about, you know, even things that we don't find as cute or enjoyable, but you know, people who get obsessed with going down the rabbit holes of conspiracy theories and even illicit types of pornography use and different things like that too.
Yeah. But that's happened to me, not with the illicit pornography use or anything, but I mean like I've gotten obsessed with like the news, for example. And like
Yeah, right?
I'll start like get obsessed with like what is happening with this politician, and I'll read everything about it and just go down all these rabbit holes. Like I'll spend a whole day, and but at the end of the day of doing that, I am like so angry and such a mess.
Yes.
Like it is too toxic for me after a while. But that's why I think like I've had to figure out how to channel it, you know,
Yeah.
and use it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's so I love that you brought that up because yeah, you can see how quickly it can go a different direction for some people. And you have someone that everyone just thinks is like some conspiracy theory whack job weirdo, and like maybe there's more to it than that.
It's
And I
I
was
mean,
like,
that's where it's like we can really like turn it inward or turn it outward, you know?
exactly, yeah. But like, you know, the cards, I mean, I think that's how both of us have learned it, is that it's like, you know, you do a card pull and then I'm, you know, obsessed with that card for the next week or
I
so.
know.
And like exploring all the angles, and it's like, yes, I've been reading for at least 15 years and I still do this.
Yeah. But I have to ask you this question because I know that you're very interested in fairy tales
Hmm.
and archetypes and things like that. Like when I was a kid, we had a book that was like, I still have the book. It's like this big of like fairy tales that I think my
Uh-huh.
grandmother gave me. I would read them every night. Like I was obsessed with fairy tales. I just needed more. And like
Yeah.
those archetypes, like when I went into reading tarot, that was the thing I was excited about, that it like tapped in. So first it was like fairy tales, then it was Greek mythology or Egyptian mythology, then religions, and then all of that got applied to the tarot. Like I just would go down those kind of archetype rabbit holes too. So it's like
Yeah.
I've always been kind of in the same realm, which is like storytelling as allegory or whatever,
Mhm. Yeah.
mythology and fairy tales.
Yeah.
So I feel like
Yeah.
there's a pipeline for the neurodivergent brain that's like fairy
Well,
tale to tarot at some point.
yeah. Well, and there was a woman in my seminar, and she's a professor of occupational therapy.
Mhm.
And she, throughout her career, has worked with mostly autistic individuals. And she had come over to talk to me because of my tarot interest. But we didn't get to talking yet. And so it wasn't until later that I had shared with her that I was autistic. But she was telling me that she is proposing this research study where basically in the past, when they've talked about autistics and their draw to things like Disney fairy tales or um anime or manga or any of
Yeah.
those, right, is that they would use really infantilizing language, is how she put it. Is she
Yeah.
was like, they would say that, like, oh, they like it because they got big eyes and, like, goofy voices and really expressive faces, and autistic people don't understand faces, so that's why they like it. And it's just very we are talking about adults too, though,
Yeah.
right? And so her proposal right now that she's studying is that she actually believes that autists have a natural understanding of the language of archetypes, and
I
that
love that. Oh
is
my
the
God.
reason for the draw to not just Disney and anime, but also even, hero's journey stories like Star
Yeah.
Wars or Lord of the Rings or the tarot or numerology, like any of these things that Greek mythology,
Yeah.
all are things that autists get very, very into. So yeah, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we even start to see some studies on that coming out, like what the autistic brain is really for. Because you figure if that shaman said that that little boy who was autistic was actually a shaman, and that was the reason for some of his behaviors, it kind of would go.
Yeah. But that makes sense to me. I don't think you can be a shaman and have a neurotypical brain. I really don't.
Right. It just doesn't. That's yeah.
Only
That's
because you're supposed to see the unseen, like that's the point, is to kind of not to pick up on patterns. I mean, I love when you said that,
absolutely.
because it reminded me of like the fact that like I can always find a 4-leaf clover, and people
Mhm.
are always like, you're so lucky. And I'm like, do you look for 4-leaf clovers? Let me ask you that. Do you ever look for them? Because I
Mhm.
look for them 100% of the time. I don't look at anybody's eyes when I'm talking to them. I look down and I look at the grass to
The
find 4-leaf
clovers.
clovers. And I'm like, I feel like my brain is really good at picking out patterns. So like the disruption of a pattern, the 3 leaved clover is the
Yeah.
pattern. And when I see a disruption in the pattern, I pick it up and I look at it.
Mhm.
That's why I always find 4-leaf clover. So it's kind of like that thing where you go, it reminds me of Groundhog Day, when I don't know if you saw that movie, but Bill
Oh
Murray's
yeah, I love that movie.
he's doing this thing where he's flicking the cards into a hat with her. He finally like tells Andy McDowell's character that he has been living the same day over and over again. And they're just sitting there wasting time. Like he's flicking cards into a hat. And she goes, like, it would take you a year to get good at this. And he goes, no, it takes 6 months, 12 hours, 8 to 12 hours a day for 6 months to get really good at it. because like he's clearly done that with time. But like that's kind of like what you were saying earlier.
Right.
Like, it does take work. It's not like people who are neurodivergent are just born with these things. It's just that they keep doing them over and over again. And same with like just looking for a 4-leaf clover. It's just like look down all the time. How do you find feathers? You're always looking for them 100% of the time. I'm always looking for a feather or a disruption in the force. And that's why it always bothers me when people say like autistic people aren't tuned in or aren't sensitive, because I think autistic people are hypersensitive. Like they hear things that aren't said in people's faces, so they feel and read that energy much more keenly than neurotypical people, in my
which experience. I feel like that's like all of our discussions with each other is us talking about things that we've experienced, and it's like all the underlayers that we saw and picked up on, but like nobody ever was like outwardly portraying or anything, but we saw it and it bothered us.
I know, when we have our complaining argument, like that's the thing about it. When I'm complaining about someone, is because that is so unnerving to feel something different than what somebody's saying.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God.
It's so like invalidating and scary and unpredictable for my brain that I like pick it apart, So if I say, that's why I always say in my circles too, like, this is a place to validate people. Like if someone says, you seem mad at me, and you say no, but you are mad, that's invalidating that person. Even if you don't want to talk about it, just say, I'm upset, but I have to figure out why, or whatever, because I want people to validate each other and their feelings around things, or to like put them, like, I promise you, I would tell you if I'm angry, I'm just introverted right now, or I'm just quiet, or I'm in pain. I have to say that a lot, because when I'm in chronic pain, when I have chronic pain, I appear very angry.
Right.
Even though I'm not angry, I'm just in pain.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I just it is funny how much of that has come up in our discussions, though, without us even realizing it. Or I was even thinking about, I have another friend, and she's a therapist, and she practices Reiki and stuff, and she's also someone that I end up doing that with because she's very neurodivergent. It's like, this person said this, but I don't really think that's what was being said. Do you? And it's like, because we'll validate each other, those of us who are neurodivergent.
Or the other, as extreme for me as someone, like I try not to take things personally because I know I read energy and stuff. But then someone being like, no, I meant it personally. Like, you have to take that one personally. Like, I really am mad at you. So like,
funny.
I need friends to tell me, no, they're aiming at you, honey.
Right. I know.
It's either extreme. Well, thanks for talking about this. I hope we have a good discussion. I kind of feel like I should put our video up so people can see all the weird stuff that we're doing all the time when we're talking.
Right. We're just constantly
drinking and moving and all that stuff. It's just such a amazing part of our discussion. So.
It is.
Well, thanks. Talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.